For the love of all that is holy, we have had enough rain for a while. Holy crap.
How about some snow?
I wrote a weather story last Wednesday that said a flood watch was in effect until Sunday morning. 4 to 6 inches of rain was possible. I hate it when the National Weather Service nails a miserable forecast. Everywhere I looked over the weekend, all I saw was high water. Reporter Hayden Gray drove from Shelby to Lexington to Belleville. High water everywhere. The last time it rained like this, I swear Noah built himself a damn ark. How wet is it? It's been so damn wet, I saw fishing worms climbing trees. It's been so wet, I saw ducks and geese flying overhead, migrating to the desert. It's been so wet, I talked to a local dairy farmer who said he's going to turn his cow lot into a mud wrestling arena. You better laugh at these folks. It only gets worse.
I wish I had a laugh track.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that's all behind us. There's no rain in the local forecast until Wednesday night. Enjoy a brief reprieve from the meteorological horrors of April in Ohio. It's the only state I know where you get winter, spring, fall, and summer all in the same day. All right, weather ran over. Let's do a show. Greetings and salutations, and welcome once again to the Newsman Weekly Podcast, episode number 43. Thanks again to all of you joining us today. We know you have choices in this media crazy world, and we're just glad that you choose to spend time with us each and every week. My many thanks also to the great folks at Relax It's Just Coffee for sponsoring this show. Every day just starts better with great coffee, and our friend Paul Kimmerling and his baristas at Relax have the best in town. I am joined once again today by Zach Heiser, the executive producer of the Newsman Weekly. Good morning, Zach. I saw your Cleveland Cavaliers went down again with a big thump on Sunday. Apparently the season is over, so how was your weekend?
My weekend was fine. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I did yell at poor Richie this morning for coming in with telling me that Darius Garland shouldn't be the starting point guard, but, you know, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. We're not going to talk Cavs.
Okay.
But
I mean, the season's over, right? I mean,
season's
really
over.
Admit
yeah,
that.
The playoffs are starting. The season's over.
Yeah. How are you going to feel if they go out in the first round?
Oh man.
Oh, I'd be brutal, but that's not going to happen.
All right.
Well, the second round.
They've won more than 60 games. They're the second round is going to be a little tougher, and then in the second round you start games every other day. So that's when depth comes into play. I think the Cavs have plenty of depth, and so I think they're going to be fine. Now, when you get to Boston, that's going to be the challenge. And I'm not going to be mad if they lose a hard-fought series to Boston. That's a really good team.
Oh, yes, you will. Don't.
Well, I'm going to be, but I'm not going to be like, let's blow
mad.
up the team.
We had a great season. It's always, you're going to be railing.
Oh, yeah, I will be
privately
for sure.
You'll be out in the newsroom complaining to Larry Phillips, but
yes.
you'll be in here. You'll be all, it was a great season, even though we got blown out by the Celtics in 4.
Game 7 at Cleveland.
Oh, that would be tough. That would that's the biggest.
Do you watch The White Lotus?
I do. I did.
So I also was I was kind of the dad.
Spoiler alert! Don't give
No,
away.
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I'm
okay.
just saying
All right.
was the dad in the Duke shirt popping pills.
Yeah.
Because Duke just screwed me. In my one bracket I was had $130 on the table, and
I was so close to winning the the Richland Source bracket because I had Auburn winning the title. They should have won in the semis, and then I had Houston beating Duke, and then Auburn beating Houston.
Right. So,
I was close.
If Auburn would have won, you probably would have had it.
Yeah,
but I think Fox has got it now. Fox and Kurt Conrad are going to be. It's going to come down to that in the Source Media bracket. But I also saw the movie Minecraft, the Minecraft movie this weekend.
Oh, I have not seen that.
You see that with your children?
I did see it with my children. It was pretty good.
What's Minecraft about?
Oh, it's a game where you have like building blocks and you just like build houses and stuff. You can also mine for materials and make armor and so The kids actually use it for coding nowadays in school because they have a coding language in it, so you can learn some coding that way.
I'm glad he explained it because I didn't know anything about Minecraft going in, but I went with my kids and some friends' kids, and then the theater was pretty packed, and these kids were like clapping mid-movie when something would, like they were cheering, and we were just like,
Is
oh
this
my
like
God.
an animated movie? Or
Yeah.
Bill, or?
It is sort of, but
Live
it's got-
action too,
Yeah,
with Jack Black. In it.
Jack Black.
Okay.
It's pretty
Jason
pretty
Momoa,
loaded
he's
cast
in it.
actually.
Yeah.
You know, every time I feel bad about my own weight, I see Jack Black, and I don't think he's pushed away from a buffet table since COVID. I'll just
Yeah,
say
he
it.
looks great.
Come on.
And he's a big old guy now. But, hey, we're also joined by Grant Ritchie from Knox Pages, the official videographer of the Newsman Weekly for at least one more week. Richie, did you manage to stay dry down in Knox County while the rest of us were swimming the backstroke up here in Richland?
Yeah, I just had a little pontoon boat on the Cocosing River, just making sure the river stayed clear. And I don't think we had any flooding in Mount Vernon. I saw, but we did have some roads that were closed throughout the county. But I mostly just stayed inside. And
Shocking.
okay, man. I also hung out with my grandma Friday night. Shout out to my grandma.
More pizzas?
Yeah. We actually did get pizza. Shout out to my grandma Miller, and we watched the Cavs play Friday night, where they almost choked away the game at the end there, but they did win. So
your grandma into the Cavs.
yeah.
Good, love it.
Why did I get this mental impression when he said he was on a pontoon on the Cocosing River of Tina Turner singing "Rolling on the River"? I just had this mental image. Hey, folks, we got another great show for you today. In a few minutes, we'll be joined by State Senator Mark Romanchuk, a resident of Ontario and an Ontario businessman. His 22nd Senate district includes Richland, Ashland, and Medina counties. He was reelected in November of 2024 after spending 8 years in the Ohio House representing Richland County. Got a lot of questions for Mark, ranging from the state's budget discussions and potential impacts on public education, public libraries, and more. We'll also talk about a bill approved in the Senate a few months ago that made significant changes to a citizen-initiated statute that 57% of Ohio voters approved in 2023 that legalized recreational cannabis in Ohio. So we'll talk to Mark about all those things. So stay tuned for that discussion. Before we get into all that, let's talk about some local news. Mansfield Mayor Jodie Perry provided her annual State of the City address on Thursday evening. The mayor, in her second year in office, said, quote, "The state of our city is strengthening each and every day," end quote. She offered her thoughts on the status of the city during a 42-minute Facebook live stream in the studios of DRM Productions. That video is now also on the city's website. I did go out to a DRM to cover the remarks live, and it was interesting to be in a place that does audio and visual on a professional, permanent basis.
Yeah.
Jay Miller and his folks know what they're doing,
do.
so it was interesting to be there for that.
Maybe I could learn a thing or two from them for this podcast.
You know what? I think you could learn a thing or 300.
Was there anything groundbreaking in the? I read your story, but I honestly forget.
I mean, thank you for that. Jeez. I did include a Facebook, a link. You could actually click on and watch her entire speech in my story. So if you'd wanted to do that, you could do that as well. She primarily cited improvements in growth, infrastructure, and safety, which she has said have been the priorities of her administration. Just for Heiser, we will put links to the city's website in the show notes for anybody who have missed the mayor's address.
How many often does she expect to give these State of the Cities?
That would be once a year.
Okay.
She did it at DR. Last year she did it in a city council meeting, but those city council meetings at that time were being broadcast or you could watch it live on the internet. Since city council's been meeting in a municipal courtroom while council chambers are being renovated, they can't show live feeds of council meetings, so she decided to move it out to DRM and do a thing where anybody who wanted to could watch it and still can. And we'll have those links to that in the show notes for Zach Heiser and everyone else.
There it is, right on the city website. I'm seeing it. It looks good.
You didn't think I looked that up before I put it in the?
I knew, of course,
put it
you
in
did.
the Newsman Weekly today. Hey, the Richland County Jail. Speaking of new, they've got a new boss. Former Ashland County Sheriff's Office Chief Deputy Dave Blake has replaced Richland County Sheriff's Office Captain Chris Blunk in the top spot of the 266-bed county corrections facility that opened in 2008 in downtown Mansfield. It's apparently a one-year deal for Blake, who told Ashland's Source on Wednesday, speaking to Dylan Carr, that he plans to retire next year once his wife becomes eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. He said the RCSO reached out to him about the job. Quote, "They called me last week and told me, we're in trouble over here. Will you help us?"
Apparently, if you just signed some guy to a 1 year.
Yep. He said, well, I like a good challenge. His annual salary for that 1 year, if he works full-time the entire year, would be a little over $103,000. Blunk, who began with the sheriff's office locally in 1998, tendered his resignation March 31st, effective the very next day, according to Richland County Sheriff's Office Major Joe Massey. He'll remain on the county payroll through September 8th, using paid time off that he had accrued. No one in the sheriff's office chose to comment on why Blunk's departure was so immediate. We did make a public records request to review the captain's personnel file, so we'll see if anything comes of that.
So he was there since 1998 and then just resigned.
Well, he'd been with the sheriff's office since 98. He took over the jail, I think, back in 2013. I'd have to go back and double-check the story. But no, he didn't run the jail every year since.
It seems
98.
odd that he just resigned on such short notice, right?
Well, I asked Major Massey. I couldn't speak with the sheriff. He was out of the office. I asked Captain Jim Sweat, and they both declined to comment. I hope to get the personnel file in the next couple of days and see if there's a letter of resignation that might shed some light on this.
How long do those records requests typically take?
I mean, the state of Ohio through the Supreme Court has said within a reasonable period of time, and they've kind of said that can be up to 10 business days. So we made the request on Thursday. We'll see how it turns out.
Interesting.
Charter Next Generation expects to create 125 new jobs between its Lexington and Ontario campuses in the next 4 years. Katie Whalen, their communications director, said the new jobs will all be full-time with benefits. Most of them focus on production line and operations work. She said the company plans to complete the projects by 2028 and will be adding the jobs within that timeline. CNG is a leading provider in specialty film and material science solutions. The company is planning a 150,000 square foot expansion on its Lexington campus to accommodate 12 new film packaging lines. Between this expansion and adding capacity at the Ontario campus, CNG plans to add 125 new jobs while retaining 1,236 jobs across both locations. The company will invest more than $106 million in facilities and advanced machinery and equipment. The Ohio Department of Development approved a project for tax credit assistance back on its meeting March 31st. Excuse me. Finally.
It's just becoming, CNG's just like taking over Lexington. It's crazy.
Well, in Lexington and Ontario, they've got a lot of work at the former GM site out there. Finally, speaking of Ontario, the future of a housing development in Ontario on a 51-acre lot near Stumbo and Ferguson Roads in Ontario is up in the air. A planned City of Ontario Planning Commission meeting to consider the rezoning needing for that development had been scheduled for Wednesday, April 9th. That meeting has now been canceled since those seeking the rezone have notified the commission they would not attend the meeting and that plans for the development are now on hold. Planning Commission members in March heard from Holden Agency CEO Jerry Holden and engineer Keith Amstutz on a proposed unit development zone for the land near Stoll Park and Maple Ridge Villas. Their belief is the development could support more than 200 homes if Council, Ontario City Council, ultimately grants a rezone request for the proposal, but that appears to be on hold now. I know there's been a lot of discussion about that, especially in social media. So stay tuned, and we'll keep
What are
track
people
of that.
saying on social media?
That the houses might be too close together. That it's yes, they're single residents, but there's not enough space between them, which is part of what the rezone would require. So there's division over whether this development is actually the kind that's needed. We'll see how that plays
Okay,
out.
but doesn't this always happen with these sorts of developments, like these not in my backyard folks and whatnot that come in and say, oh, this house is this and that and whatnot?
You talking about NIMBYs, not in my backyard?
Yeah.
But they often have a loud voice, and they're often heard. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how this plays out. But you know what? That's enough for now. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will be joined by State Senator Mark Romanchuk. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Newsman Weekly podcast. Joining us now, as promised, is State Senator Mark Romanchuk, veteran legislator whose 22nd district includes Richland, Ashland, and Medina counties. Good morning, Mark. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for getting up so darn early.
Well, good morning, Carl, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Now, let's just dive right in. Now, Mark, the simple fact is Republicans control Ohio government right now. You've got the majority in the House and the Senate. You've got the governor's mansion. You got 6 of the 7 seats on the Supreme Court. Republicans have been in control for a while. I was reading over the weekend in preparation for the show. The GOP has controlled Ohio's Senate for 40 years. Republicans have controlled the Ohio House for all but 2 years since January of '95. I think it's fair to say the ball remains in the Republicans' court. Do Republicans in Columbus feel any of that pressure, and how will you determine if this current session is a win or a loss, and what are your benchmarks for this?
Well, Carl, first, you have to kind of ask yourself, why has the Republicans been dominating Ohio politics for so long? I would say the answer to that is simply we have the best ideas, and that's why the voters elect us. And I'd like to point out, you said 40 years, so that's long before the Donald Trump kind of phenomenon that started.
I mean, it was the year I got married, 1985.
Wow. You've been married a long time.
Yeah,
Good
almost
for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So first, I think the voters of Ohio like our ideas the best, and the question then remains, have we implemented or executed on those ideas well enough to keep the dominance going forward? I think so far we have, and that's why you see all Republicans in the statewide offices, the legislature dominated by Republicans, so on. Yes, I think there is pressure to make sure that we're following through on the ideas that we ran on, promises made, promises kept kind of thing. I think that is important, because so many times people run for office and they say a lot of things, and a lot of big things, and maybe not a lot of it gets implemented to the point the public wants. So I think in many ways, since I've been in office, since 2013, we've made some good moves, and some of the numbers support that. So I think as long as our ideas are the better ideas, we'll probably stay in office or be the dominant party for a long time.
Now, one of the things that is currently making headlines and making news down in Columbus, the Ohio House last week in its budget proposal that I think they passed last week, would make significant. They didn't pass it last week.
Didn't pass it yet.
Okay.
It should be this week. Probably this Wednesday will be the final version. That's the version that will get voted on the House floor and then sent to the Senate.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. One of the things I did notice, unless it changes when they do vote, they're going to make some changes to Ohio's public school funding formula. One of the stories I read, I believe, is in the Cincinnati Enquirer. The House plan would put about $226 million more state dollars toward public K-12 education than Governor DeWine had proposed. But school funding advocates warn it severely undercuts what the state has been working toward the past 4 years as part of the Fair School Funding Plan that you guys approved in 2021. I believe under that plan, schools would need $666 million, which is about $400 million less than found in the House budget. We've had a lot of, I won't say a lot, I'll say several school districts in our area that are kind of sounding the alarm that there are millions of dollars at stake. And you and I are old enough to remember the DeRolf legal battle back in '97. The Ohio Supreme Court ruled the way that Ohio funds schools is unconstitutional because it relies too much on local property taxes and creates a lot of inequities around the state in terms of the quality of education kids get. For example, a student in Adams County may not get the same education as somebody in Shaker Heights. From your perspective, what is right about the bill that the House is thinking about passing on Wednesday, and what needs to be changed in the Senate? And is the House bill putting too much of the burden on local property owners to fund public education again?
Well, thank you.
That's a lot of stuff.
That is a lot of things.
That's a lot of preamble for one question, and I apologize.
Yeah. So first, DeRolf, 1997, and there were a few other decisions related to DeRolf a few years after that. The decision said that the system relied too much on property taxes. And therefore, in the underserved areas, low-income areas, those property taxes may not be supportive of the right kind of education. Since then, that funding formula that you mentioned has been massively adjusted. So the state sends a lot of money to those low-income districts to make up for those low property values. So it's not clear if the DeRolf's decision would still be held unconstitutional. Nobody knows. Everybody has an opinion about it. I have an opinion about it. But until somebody runs it back through the courts, we don't know if it's unconstitutional. I happen to think it is constitutional because of that state funding formula that underfunds the high wealth districts and really quite overfunds the low income districts. So we've evened that out over the years using this funding formula. Now, a few years ago, there was a task force in Columbus to put together a new funding formula based on the cost of educating a student. I was semi-involved with that on the front end. It's called the Fair Funding Formula, as you mentioned. It was due to be phased in over 6 years. So phase 1, 2, and 3. We phased in phase 1 and 2. Now we're at the budget cycle that phase 3 would have to be brought to light. The issue with phase 3 is it costs the state $1.8 billion. The budget likely won't support that this time around. So what is very, very, very common with the budget, with the funding formula for schools, it is always tweaked. Since I've been there, the funding formula has never been allowed to kind of run its full course. In other words, whatever number it spits out is the number that's sent to the district. There's always caps, guarantees. There's always things that are done to tweak the formula so it puts out the right amount of money overall, because we don't do school funding in a vacuum. We have an overall budget that we have to put together, and we have finite amount of money. At the federal government, they seem to think that they have infinite amount of money, regardless of the money that they bring in tax revenue. We match expenses to revenue, and we have to be very careful that we don't appropriate more money than what we're going to bring in. So that funding formula has always been tweaked and always been adjusted, and it probably always will never likely be allowed to run through its full amounts to each district, because there's always restrictions, there's always constraints with your budget, and there's other things that need to be paid for.
Well, what would be your message to, excuse me for a second, what would be your message? Some of the schools I've seen that have kind of raised a red flag, I mean, from Lexington out to Lucas, they're talking about millions of dollars. What's your message to them? Is it hold on and wait for a minute and see how this turns out, or what's your message to them?
It's still fairly early in the process, but last week the House passed what they call a substitute version of the bill. So that was their first cut at changes made to the governor's proposed budget. In that first change, they fully funded the guarantee part of the funding formula. That is what most of the schools locally were referring to. So that's been fixed. Now, there's still the issue with the input information on what it costs to educate a student. That's part of that fair funding formula. That still, those inputs have not been updated. If we were to update those inputs, that's where that $1.8 billion pops out at the other end, and where I don't think the budget will support that. So part of the problem has been fixed. That just hasn't caught up to the school districts yet, but by now they probably know. But that happened just last week.
Now, you folks over on the other side of the other side of the building in the Senate, you've obviously been paying attention to what's going on in the House. What are your general thoughts about what the House is about to give you?
For me, my general thoughts are, welcome to a state budget. This happens every 2 years. This is my 7th budget. And every 2 years, there's controversy, and it's usually centered around a few items. One is certainly and always will be school funding. So there's still a lot of time here. The Senate hasn't put its fingerprint yet onto the budget, but so we'll see where this goes. I think the school districts, if they were to be listening to this, would know that generally speaking, they're not going to get less money than what they've got in the last 2 years. So that's usually the yardstick. Whether they get an increase or not remains to be seen, but certainly they won't go backwards.
All right, now staying with the topic of public education, Richland Source reporter Katie Ellington-Sorrell just finished a 5-part series on the financial situation in the Mansfield City School District, one you're familiar with over the years. But one of the things it pointed out is the district's declining enrollment. That had been happening before the Ohio Ed Choice program, but certainly Ed Choice opened the doors for more students to transfer to private schools and take their funding with them. What would you say to supporters of Mansfield City Schools in similar districts who are struggling to keep their doors open while the state may be opening the doors to more non-public schools?
Yeah, so even before the most recent expansion of school choice, Mansfield has seen a declining enrollment, sadly. Part of that is the city, what's happening here in our city. And then the other part is, well, it's first, you have to understand why parents want to pull their children out of a school district. The number one reason is safety and security. So if they believe their student is unsafe, they're being bullied, whatever the case may be, that is the number one reason they pull students out of a school district. I believe in school choice. We've always had school choice, but you had to be wealthy in order to take your children out of one school district and put them in another. Today, whether you're wealthy or not, you have that option. And we believe that allowing parents to choose the best setting for their children is an absolute, will lead to the absolute best outcomes you can have. So the other thing I would say to schools is they kind of have home court advantage, if I want to use a sports analogy. Mm-hmm. So it's their student to have. They by default get the student. They by default get the customer. And the other charter schools, we call them community schools in Ohio, then have to, for whatever reason, market them, attract them away from that home district. That's hard to do. That's not easy to do. And I can tell you, in business, it's very, very hard to get a new customer versus keeping the ones that you have. So I would use that same analogy in our school systems and meet the needs of the parents. If you meet the needs of the parents, I think they stay in that home school district.
Is this a case where you think city schools and any public school district for that matter needs to perhaps do a better job of marketing itself by pointing out its advantages and why kids should stay there?
Absolutely, yes. So many, if not all, the school districts are doing a pretty good job. And they just need to communicate that. They need to be telling their story all the time. So if there's an incident or if a child isn't in the parent's mind being quite treated properly in their mind, The school has their story out there, and hopefully there'd be a good enough relationship there that they walk into the school, talk to the principal, talk to the superintendent, and work things out. But generally speaking, yes, they have to tell their story. I'm in and out of school districts all the time. I was in a couple last week. And, there's some good things going on in our public schools. No question about it. They just need to communicate that as much as possible.
Is there anything about the school choice laws that are in place now that you would revise, or is there anything that you'd like? Do you see any faults or holes in them, or do you just think the issue is more just like what we just talked about, like schools need to do a better job of marketing, and school choice is kind of a parent's right, and it's fine the way it is?
Yeah, I think it will always be looked at and always tweaked going forward. The cost for the school choice program is about a half of what it costs to educate a student in the public schools. So that gets a lot of attention in Columbus when these decisions are being made. And, at the moment, I would say it's in pretty good shape except for one thing. And that is when we did the expansion last budget, we left out a group of schools. We refer to them as the 08 schools, or something called non-public, non-chartered schools. So we have one here in Mansfield, Temple Christian, Mansfield Temple Christian, that's non-chartered, non-public school. They're not eligible to receive voucher money. So the student, even though they are leaving a school district and coming to that school, the money does not follow that student. So there's about 70 or so of those schools around the state, and they got left out. So if I were proposing a tweak, and it is in the House version, I would say we need to include those schools in the ability of the money following the student. But that'd be the only tweak at the moment.
What happens if we get to a point, and I don't know when that point would be or if it would happen, where any public school district that is not meeting the needs and they sees a certain, whatever percentage of students leave, if it gets hollowed out to the point that it really can't function anymore, what happens then to the students that are left?
Well, I don't know that that's happened yet around the state, so I don't know what the procedure might be for that. I think that won't happen. I think schools will step up their game if that's what's needed, and or tell their story a little bit better. I think this idea of having parents choose which setting a child should be educated in will raise the bar for everybody, and including those public schools. So we'll see if that happens, but so far I don't believe it has. And remember, there are lots of state resources. So when a district gets in financial problems or academic problems, the state brings in a lot of resources to help that school district get back on their feet. So there's an awful lot of help given to some of these school districts that might be struggling. But in the end, this will raise the bar for everybody.
All right, well, let's switch gears for a minute. In 2023, 57% of Ohio voters approved a law making cannabis legal in Ohio. It set up the ability of Ohio residents to grow cannabis at home and also helped establish guidelines around how recreational cannabis dispensaries would operate. But in February, I think the Ohio Senate voted 23-9, kind of along party lines, to make substantial changes to the program. I think it was Senator Huffman went so far as to say, quote, "We've never known exactly why voters voted for the initiated statute." So why did you make so many changes to a law that Ohio residents had already approved?
So you said it was an initiated statute. That means basically we're passing a law at the ballot, and the authors, who was the marijuana industry, who wrote the language, when you get a chance to write the rules for yourself, you tend to make it pretty beneficial for yourself. And that was what was passed at the ballot. I think most of the voters passed what they thought was legalization of recreational marijuana, and that's okay. But in that ballot language, there were a lot of other details. For example, it only had a 10% tax rate. very low when we compare ourselves to the rest of the states in the country. I think Illinois is at 40, and we're at 10.
What's Michigan's? Do you know?
It's higher than 10.
Okay,
it's higher than 10, I believe, but it's not a big difference. Maybe 15. So that would be just one thing. The ballot language that was passed allows for 2.5 ounces of marijuana on a person's as a possession on a person. That's 200 marijuana joints. Why does anybody need to walk around with 200 joints on their person? I don't think there's anybody can come up with a good reason for that. The THC levels that were passed as part of the language are very high, 7 times higher for plant material compared to the marijuana of old. When you were at Woodstock years ago, it would have been 7 times less potent. So,
and that was a good time, though.
Well, I'm sure
Woodstock,
it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was. So
You're not that old.
I was 8, but I had a good
Right.
time.
Yeah, still, you have parents. Yeah, make sure you had a good time. So the THC level today has been genetically engineered. It is very, very strong. And my concern with very strong marijuana products is our children. If our children get this new genetically engineered product, it's going to be big problems for their development, their brain development. It will not end well. So, although the initiative doesn't allow marijuana to be sold for kids, for children or anybody less than 21, it will be diverted. It will get in the hands of our children, and we're going to regret that. And that's primarily why I was against the initiative, because of all those details. I wasn't necessarily against legalizing marijuana. I would have preferred that the legislature did it so we could write in some of these rules that made sense, because what was passed at the ballot, I absolutely can tell you, does not make sense. When you compare ourselves to the other states, for example, California has a 1 ounce possession limit. We're at 2.5 ounces. So this is not going to bode well for us. We can look at Colorado, for example, and see how this is going to play out. It may even play out worse in Ohio because what we passed at the ballot was so egregious.
Now, one of the things I think you guys were considering changing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you ended up leaving it alone. Local government entities like the city of Mansfield approved allowing cannabis dispensaries in the city. And I know I cover city council, and one of the things that helped motivate them was the potential revenue that they could get. The idea being of the 10% state excise tax, that a municipality would get 36% of that. I think there was initially some thought about taking that away or reducing it. What did you guys end up doing with that?
Well, we haven't done anything yet. I suspect that will be done in the budget. The House did not touch it so far. They got one more opportunity to make changes to the initiated statute before they pass it out of the House. But I think it stays in there. I just don't know if it will be at that 1/3 level. We'll see. I think it stays in, but remember, when this was passed at the ballot, everybody knew it was initiated statute. It was not a constitutional amendment, which means the legislature can't touch. When you pass a law at the ballot, that means legislatures in the future can tweak it, change it, do what they want with it. That's just the system we have, and that's what was passed at the ballot.
But if you have a municipality like the city of Mansfield that says, okay, we're going to allow it because we're going to make X amount of revenue. We're going to get our 36% of the 10%. What happens to those cities? I mean, if that gets reduced or gets taken away, how is that? I hate to use the word fair because in terms of politics and government, nothing's fair. It's what you come up with. What's the message to cities that may have approved these things only to see that revenue not develop like they thought it would?
Well, the message could be you jumped the gun. You should have waited till the legislature weighed in on all these details that probably most Ohioans didn't realize what they were voting for. Also, I would encourage municipalities to look at the cost of having a dispensary in their districts, in their jurisdiction. There will be a cost. And the question is, will that cost outweigh the revenue they're going to receive? I don't know. Hopefully that was a cost-benefit analysis that municipalities went through, including Mansfield. I'd also note that every almost every jurisdiction outside of Mansfield said no to dispensaries.
Right.
They did a cost-benefit analysis and decided that, well, maybe, yes, we would get revenue, but there's also a cost to law enforcement. There's a cost to addiction services. There's all kinds of other costs that will likely be incurred by allowing dispensaries in our community. So that's an experiment that yet gets run out. We'll see how it goes. But I think everybody else in Richland County, most jurisdictions in Richland County said no. Mansfield was the only one who said yes.
I have to ask, with the back to the THC levels, and I'm just curious, like, why? So Second Amendment, right? That's fine, but we allow parents to lock up their guns and gun safety. Alcohol is something, if a child got their hands on a bottle of whiskey, they could kill themselves with that. Why do you think we allow responsible adults to own guns and drink alcohol and do other things that are unsafe to children? Why is cannabis such a... I just feel like I hear more about cannabis being, the children argument than other things that adults, responsible adults are allowed to use.
Yeah, so hopefully parents will be responsible and there'll be very little diversion. The fact is the kids are going to get it. I can tell you that if you talk to Children's Services here in Richland County, they are telling me that every single children's case that they have has a marijuana component to it. I do a ride-around every year in one of my 3 counties that I represent. I did one in Medina before the initiative passed back in November of last year. It was, I think, October timeframe. I did a ride-around. And the first door we were hitting was a door where a child had gotten into some gummies at the neighbor's house and got really, really sick and had to be sent to the emergency room. Well, by sending a child to the emergency room that is sick because of marijuana in the marijuana use, that was a mandatory reporter. So they had to report to Children's Services, hey, we have a child in here that's, So this is going to continue to go up. Children's Services is one of those costs to a community that's we're going to start seeing. And again, adults can do what adults do. That's not my issue. It's all about the children. And we know that when their brain is developing up through, I think, about age 25, mid-20s, you don't want to ingest anything marijuana related because it will have some long-term effects. So
Reggie,
that's my fear.
You're
Reggie?
not 25 yet. Let's,
yeah, Reggie.
Slow down.
Yeah,
Reggie.
remember.
Yeah, slow down. You're
what
not
I said.
developed yet. Now, speaking of what the Ohio House budget's looking at, I'm told that it does include what would be millions of dollars in funding for the U.S. 30 corridor broadband project, which would allow for high-speed internet access along the corridor from Worcester to Lima, which would include Richland, Ashland, Crawford counties. What are your thoughts on that project, and what are the chances it stays in the budget through the Senate process?
Well, I think it's a good project. Representative John really deserves a credit. She took the lead on this. And it's kind of interesting when you consider there's no fiber optic on that 30 corridor, which runs from border to border in our state. It's kind of odd that there wouldn't be that high-speed internet, high-speed fiber optic. And because the base out here needs it, and our North Central State College needs it, or OSU Mansfield needs it, I think it's a great project. The funding source is a pot of federal money, broadband money, which is good because the Senate won't care so much about that. It's if they were using state money, it would rise to a different level of scrutiny. But the fact that Marilyn and her colleagues have chosen a federal pot of money, I think it's good, assuming that federal pot of money allows for this fiber optic corridor to be built.
Right. Well, speaking of budgets and funding, probably the last topic on budgets and funding, again, back at the Ohio House, again, what I read, one of the main sources of state funding for Ohio's public libraries is being reduced in the Ohio House plan that's up for a vote. I'm read that House Republicans want to cut an estimated $45 million in their version of the 2-year state budget. Excuse me, and also eliminate something called the Public Library Fund, which is kind of a designated pot of money. Thoughts on the House funding plan for public libraries, and how's that going to go in the Senate?
Yeah, so first of all, it's a cut when you consider the governor's budget. But so we're going from the governor's budget of being just over $1 billion to $980 million.
Okay.
Now, first of all, think about that amount. That's a lot of money. Of
That's,
course,
that's almost what Richie makes.
Well,
last
I've
week.
heard that about Richie. So it's still $980 million. It's still quite a bit of money. And so I would say that first. You always have to look at the amounts that we're talking about. And the other thing that's commonly used in Columbus is it's a cut. Well, it's really not a cut until the final version is out. And then we determine whether it's a decrease, increase, or if it's flat funded based on last year's fiscal year number. So when they say it's a cut during the budget process, it means, it's a little less than what the governor proposed. So it's not really a true cut. It's only a cut when you consider what the governor proposed. So the other thing is that has historically been the amount of money appropriated for libraries has historically been a percent of our general revenue fund. I personally don't like a percent of anything. I personally do not like indexes where the legislature says, we're just going to grow this by a rate of inflation, or we're going to give a percentage to a certain group based on our general revenue fund. I don't like that because that reduces transparency to the legislator who's responsible for appropriating that money. I want to, every 2 years, look at every amount, so that $980 million, and decide, is that reasonable? Is that a good number? Does that properly fund our libraries? I think it probably does. But I want to know what that number is, that hard number, instead of it being a percent of some other account. I think that's important. I think my experience in Columbus has been that when they put these indexes in, like a percent or a adjuster based on inflation, it's because they don't want to make a hard decision in the future. I believe the voters sent me to Columbus to make the hard decision, so I want to know, is it $980 million? Is it a little over $1 billion? What's the number? I don't want to hear a percent, because it's hard to, you can do some math and get to an estimate, but by doing $980 million, that's the number. It's not going to go up. It's not going to go down. It's going to be $980 million. I think that's the job of a legislator, to know exactly how much money you're saying yes to. So I prefer this method more so than I do a percent method, because then I know I can make the decision, yes, it's the right amount, or no, it's not.
Yeah, we used to call that, like, at least when I was in charge of a newspaper budget, it was, I think it called it zero-based budgeting. Don't assume because you got money for this that you're getting 3% more next year.
Yeah, so we do not, government typically does not do zero-based government, at least at the state level. And we know I don't know what they do at the federal level. I'm not sure they even really do budgets there. But at the state level, we don't do zero-based budgeting. We should, but we don't. So at a minimum, I need as much transparency as possible. So when I'm voting on a budget, I want to know exactly what those numbers are. I don't want to hear an estimate that it may be this and may be that in the future based on some percentage. Give me the number. I'll try and make, to the best of my ability, a determination if that's the right number.
Now, I know I'm going to switch over to some other numbers that are outside your purview as a state lawmaker, but I got to ask your opinion of what's going on in Washington the last several days. President Trump last week celebrated what he called Liberation Day by enacting what he called reciprocal tariffs on nearly every trading partner in the world. You've got almost 4 decades of experience in small business. You've worked overseas in the former Soviet Union. You've worked in Japan. Based on your experience, do tariffs make sense, and is it truly short-term pain for long-term gain, as the president says?
Well, first of all, remember, I have a super unique perspective on this. I'm a manufacturer, so my company will get hit with increased steel prices, increased aluminum prices. All my inputs to my processes will go up. We've been through this before. In his first term, the tariffs weren't as sweeping as they are now. But we went through this before. Yes, it should be short term, and yes, I believe in the tariffs. The reason is because we've been getting cheated for years and years and years, starting probably back into the early 90s. My company's been cheated. My company's been cheated in that I haven't been able to hire more people because I'm losing work to China. Why am I losing work to China? Well, they cheat. They have tariffs on their products, but more importantly, as it related to me, they had to do something called currency manipulation. So it makes their currency look really, really cheap. So it makes their imports look super low. Every time I'm up against a Chinese, I'm bidding a job for a company that's using a Chinese supplier, I am always 40% higher. In some cases, I can't even buy the material for the right cost. So just drive around Mansfield. I came in 4th Street this morning.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember what 4th Street looked like when I was a young boy, in the car with my parents going to church at St. Peter's, 4th Street looked like, a beautiful, just the homes along 4th Street were beautiful. That's not what they look like today. In part, that's because of bad trade policy. We've allowed all these jobs to leave our country, all not because we got out-competed. I want to compete with everybody in the world, but it has to be a fair, level playing field. It has not been a fair playing field for years and years. That's why we've lost all this industry. That's why we've lost all these jobs. That's why Mansfield looks like the same kind of city as I see when I travel the rest of the state, where it's just been gutted because our trade policy has allowed all this work to go overseas. We don't mind competing with anybody in the world, but it has to be a fair, level playing field.
Do you think with as far as like ushering back in like a golden age of manufacturing, do you think that there's like an appetite for that among the American worker, or do you think that's just kind of in the past and this free trade kind of allows us to? I'm not saying all tariffs are bad. I'm sure there's a balance to strike, but do you feel like there's some downsides to like, okay, let's produce Nintendos in Ohio? Like, do you think that's realistic, or do you really think that like the long-term plan here is to really get like, manufacturing Nikes and Nintendos and things that they do in the South Pacific?
So, there's no problem with building some shoes and building electronic items overseas, none at all. But those markets then have to be opened up for our products. They're not open now, and that's what the president is trying to achieve. So remember that. I think if he does it right, it will be short term. I think one of the countries, Vietnam, has already said, okay, we'll go to zero tariffs if you go to zero tariffs. That's the hope. That's the objective. All this is where it's zero across the board. Everybody competes on, productivity things of that nature, not because they have an inherent subsidy from their government or they're doing currency manipulation. That puts us at a huge disadvantage. And then if you poll everybody, Americans and Ohioans, they love manufacturing. They want to make more product here. And if you go into a modern-day manufacturing facility, they look very different than what they did years and years ago. Very high-tech, very clean. People that work there are very happy because it's very different than what it used to be. So manufacturing is how you create wealth. There's only 3 ways to create wealth. You make it, you grow it, or you mine it.
Or you steal it.
Well, that's
Plunder.
what the other countries have been doing, is stealing our wealth. And there's been a huge transfer of wealth from our country to Asia, from our country, all over the world. And I don't mind transferring wealth if we can't compete with those other countries.
The point of trade, right?
We're okay. We got to sharpen our pencil. We got to do better. Maybe education is a piece of that. Absolutely, it is. But in the end, we need a fair, level playing field, and I think where most Americans and most Ohioans are at, they're okay with that. So hopefully it'll be short-term pain for this long-term gain.
One of the things I heard somebody say is when Donald Trump says tariff, the actual word he's saying is negotiate.
I think that's probably right. I mean, every word out of his mouth to me seems negotiate. Right. I mean, tariffs is just one of many examples you could probably use. And I'm okay with that because every president, every administration has talked about leveling the playing field and reducing that trade deficit that we have every year with other countries. he's actually trying to do something about it. So I appreciate his efforts. I think he deserves a chance to let things play out. And if it goes like the Vietnam story went at the end of last week, I think they're on a good path. So all we're asking for is a level playing field.
Senator, I wanted to get your opinion on the proposed $600 million state-backed bonds for the Cleveland Browns stadium that they want to put in Brook Park. Is that something you support doing, or do you think it should be funded in different forms?
So it hasn't come over to the Senate yet. The governor had a different idea about increasing the tax on sports betting to create this pool of money that could be used for all kinds of sports facilities, whether it be football or what have you. If we do this $600 million deal for the Browns, it's going to create this unbelievable slippery slope where everybody else is going to come in. The Bengals will be next.
No.
The Guardians will be after that.
We're bringing back the Mansfield Hawks.
Kentucky.
We need a new arena.
Kentucky can pay for the
Mansfield needs a
Bengals.
project. Who
Yes,
knows? So
yes.
we have to be very cognizant that our decisions today will have some sort of ramifications in the future. And the way they're proposing it is an interesting idea. So basically the bonds that would be issued by the state would be paid back by local, increased revenue on sales, and I think they're going to have a lodging tax. I'm not sure what revenues. I haven't looked at it yet because it hasn't come to the Senate. So the question is, who will guarantee the repayment of these bonds? Will it be on the state, or will it be on potentially the Haslams? If it's on the Haslams, it's not a terrible thing if we can get that guarantee from them. So who would have first position if something went south on the bond? Say the revenue that came in because of the new stadium wouldn't support the payments of the bonds. Who would be first in line to, take up that gap? If it's the Haslams, and it probably should be, I'm probably okay with that. If it's the state, then I'm going to have to scratch my head a little bit and think about it longer.
But the plan A is for the revenue to pay off those bonds,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. But when there's a gap,
Right.
something goes wrong, like the Browns continue to be 1-15,
Now,
and the revenue isn't like it should be, who's going to take up that gap? If it's going to be on the state, that will have to be seriously considered. It should be on the owners of the stadium. Just like when I build a new facility for my manufacturing company, I don't get state help. I had to finance it myself. I had to put my house on the line. I got to put my wife's assets on the line. They're both the same. But we're all, all in. And if something comes up short, we got to figure it out using our personal assets.
And I'll just say, and nobody asked my opinion about this, but that stadium that the Browns play in is not a very old stadium. It was built with Cuyahoga County sin taxes on alcohol and tobacco. And what's going to happen? Are they just going to abandon that? Is that just going to get raised? I mean,
turn it to actually use the lakefront for build a pier.
that stadium is just fine. There's nothing wrong with that
Well,
stadium.
it's kind of, I don't know.
The Packers play in Lambeau
Got
Field.
a lot of
okay?
bad memories.
Lambeau Field has been around for a hell of a lot longer
Yeah.
than Brown Stadium, and it'll be around a hell of a lot longer more. And I just don't. Nobody asked my opinion, but public financing of private sports facilities, no, not a huge fan.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
But from just like hey, I like to go to Cleveland, and I'd like to go to a brand new stadium, and I'd like to see the lakefront used for more entertainment and other things, and develop downtown Cleveland, and then take an area like Brook Park and make that a destination as well. I think for like the overall economy, it's probably a win.
Yeah, you've said something is because what we've been hearing in Columbus for a long time, half a dozen years plus, is Cleveland wants to develop that lakefront. In fact, we've already helped fund a land bridge. And you think, what's a land bridge? A land bridge is going to be a bridge that they're going to build from the shoreline over, is it Route 90 that runs right along the shoreline up there? So that sort of cuts off having a freeway right next to your shoreline isn't probably how you would do it today if you were laying everything out. So we've helped fund, the state has helped fund what they call a land bridge that will be 150 yards wide. And basically, it's a park going to be on top of this land bridge. And that land bridge will then connect the shoreline to downtown and help with this issue with that darn Route 90 being right there by the shores of Lake Erie. So I can tell you the focus from Cleveland, what I've heard at least in the legislature, is we want to develop that lakefront. We think it's underdeveloped. We think we can do some great things. That stadium, if you moved it to Brook Park, and you had a dome stadium that you could use year-round for other events, basketball events, NCAA events. Concerts, or maybe other things that we could use that for, because that outdoor stadium probably, there's nothing going on there today, certainly because it's too cold. So there's something, if we think more long-term, like you said, I think it should be thought through. It stinks that they want to move it out of Cleveland, but the overall picture might be better if they do that.
Lambeau Field, Green Packers are like a socialist utopia. You know,
we're not.
Not every. No, we're not.
No, we're not. You know, the nice thing about the Packers being publicly owned is every year, talk about transparency, they have to publish and make an annual financial report. They're the only NFL team that has to do that, and it just completely pisses off every other NFL owner because, well, here's what we're making in terms of league revenue, local revenue, TV revenue, and it's all laid out for people to see because the Packers, and as an owner, I own one share of stock and have since 1997. I mean, that's a great thing. And Lambeau Field will never be domed because football, Mr. Heiser, was meant to be played outside.
That's what they say.
Yep. All right, Mark, thank you very much. This is your turn. You're in the second year of the final 4-year term in the state Senate. What are your priorities that we haven't talked about today in the next couple of years in Columbus that you would really like to see get done?
Well, there's a few things left. One of my main objectives when I ran in 2012 and got elected and started office in 2013 is to make the state more business friendly. I think in many, many ways we've achieved that. There was a ranking that came out at fall last year from CNBC that has Ohio ranked 7th in business friendliness. We think that's important. We think that's led to some of these huge announcements you've been hearing. So certainly our GDP, our state GDP has grown about 25%, just under 25% over the last 10 years. So the state's on the right track with regard to attracting good businesses and creating great opportunities, especially for these young people. So what's left is energy policy. Energy all of a sudden has moved to almost to the top, and the reason that is because of all the data centers that are being proposed to be built, not only in Ohio but in other parts of our country. And these data centers are what's going to run artificial intelligence, or AI. So as they start to come to Ohio, and they already have, we're going to need more energy. So not only do we need more energy for the AI boom, but the federal government has been shutting down some of our generation plants, and primarily what I mean by that are the coal-fired plants. Those are all going away. And it was just a short 15 years or so where about 80% of our electric was generated using coal. That's all going away, and we're replacing much of it with natural gas, which, as you know, we're sitting on top of a huge natural gas find. So energy policy is going to be important to me. I've been working on it for literally 8 years. One of the frustrating things about this job is it takes forever to get anything done. And finally, we passed a bill just a few weeks ago, Senate Bill 2, that incorporated 3 of my initiatives that I've been working on for 8 years. So I expect, what does that mean? That means we're going to get more generation built in our state, and it means our utility bills will stay as low as possible. Utility bills are rising across the state, across our country. Every state has this problem. We think we can solve it here, and we think we're going to solve it using natural gas, which is our resource. Ohio's resource. Okay. Yes, and the beauty of that is we're paying ourselves for our own resource, so it's a win-win. So energy still remains high on the list for me. I think we're going to get that done soon in the next couple of months. So I'll feel very good with our energy policy going forward to drive a bigger economy, more opportunity for young people, and we're going to be able to take care of these huge data centers that are coming to our state and building here. So energy policy will be behind the list.
All right. And folks, we are going to wrap up today's show on that note. Many thanks to Ohio Senator Mark Romanchuk for joining us here today. Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And our guest next week will be Mansfield Public Works Director Louis Andres, who will bring us up to speed with what's happening in the city's parks this spring and summer. Thanks again to all of you for listening to the Newsman Weekly. I'll be back in a second to put a bow on this week's episode. But until then, remember what Mark Twain said. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything.